Do you own or rent your home? Sure you do, and I'll bet it can be hard work. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowner's or renter's insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
Hi there, and good evening, and welcome to the Jimbo Hannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Online, find us at jimbohannonshow.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo Talks, and we will be talking tonight about a new eviction ban which the Centers for Disease Control has issued for most of this country through October the 3rd. With that story, here's Tim McGuire.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has found legal authority for President Biden to declare a new 60-day eviction moratorium for areas where some 90% of the people live. The decision follows a 5-day protest by Missouri Democratic Congresswoman Cori Bush and others on the steps of the Capitol building.
Stand up and speak for those who are oftentimes saying, who speaks for me? Who speaks for me? Who listens?
The rent crisis continued despite Congress providing some $47 billion in relief. The vast majority of the money has yet to get to renters and their landlords to stave off looming evictions. Tim McGuire, Washington.
And we'll talk about that tonight with your calls at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, with our guest in this portion of the program tonight. And I hope I'm saying your name correctly, because I'm sure you've had it butchered on many an occasion. Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge, would that be correct?
That's perfect, yes. Hi, Jimbo.
Hi. Thank you for being with us tonight. She is founder and owner of the New York City-based law firm Outerbridge Law, which is online at their name, outerbridgelaw.com. Now, we will, at various points through the program, get into some of the technical weeds here of who has what authority and this sort of thing, who has what money that has or has not been spent. But I will start, and we will also get into the notion that there will undoubtedly be deadbeats who will take advantage of this. However, if in fact we really are facing what some fear could be as many as 1 million renters added to the already huge rolls of the homeless in this country, that's simply not acceptable. And we need to find a way, if in fact the current way that is now being used has legal flaws, and we need to find a way that does not have them. So I would start with the basic premise that we can't allow this to happen. People who, in many cases, through no fault of their own, through the shutdown of the economy and the resulting after effects of that, this can't be allowed to happen, would be my take. Ms. Pierre Outerbridge, your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, this is an emergency. We already had a housing crisis in this country prior to the pandemic. This is truly an emergency that needs to be rectified, and the damage the damage needs to be stopped. And this is what the eviction moratorium, the CDC extension through October 3rd, is supposed to be doing.
And I'm not sure about the October 3rd date. I'm not sure how arbitrarily that was chosen. Obviously, that's 2 months and change away, a little under 2 months away from where we speak. And again, I'm not sure how that date was arrived at, but again, at least it's a temporary reprieve, as the previous eviction ban had ended, I guess, last Saturday? Is that right? The end of July?
Correct. July 31st, yes.
Yeah. Again, I'm not sure what the legal basis is for the CDC to do this as well. I know that among other things that has been said in this regard, the CDC says evicting people could be detrimental to public health and would interfere with efforts to slow the pandemic. I don't doubt that that's true in its entirety. Whether or not that confers on the CDC this power, honestly, I don't know. You would be the attorney on hand tonight.
Well, we know that the Supreme Court in June said that the CDC does not have this power, that there needs to actually be congressional authority, and that the Supreme Court would reject any executive action on this, right? But at this point, the Biden-Harris administration has decided that it's going to take its chances, and in view of this national health emergency, it's going to continue the moratorium. At this point, they've decided to issue it not as a rule, but as an order based on a health emergency, and they await legal challenges from landlord associations who are, I'm sure, gearing up to challenge this order. But at this point, it is in effect. I don't know why they chose October 3rd. I'm assuming that they are choosing it, right? That's my gut feeling, that they are choosing it. Well, what has been told is that they want the money to be doled out, the $46.7 billion to be doled out, and that this is enough time for the states to dole out this emergency rental assistance. So this is supposedly enough time to actually dole it out, even if there's a challenge at the end of it. So that's where we stand.
How long have they had that money? It seems like that this is taking a bit longer than it certainly should take. I mean, it's not as if the states are being told to pony up $27.6 billion of their money, to which every state could say, and with a pretty straight face, say, we don't have $27.6 billion lying around. We're strapped as it is for tax revenues. But this is money being given to them for this specific purpose, which they can take credit for. And for the life of me, I've never understood politicians who, given essentially a gift, here, pass this out, tell everybody how wonderful you are, be sure to vote for me even though you had nothing to do with it. I don't get it. Why is there even a problem? Why are we even having this discussion on the air tonight?
Why is there a problem? I think just like the unemployment, the massive unemployment no one expected COVID, that's for sure, right? No one expected this health emergency. No one expected the massive amount of people that would need unemployment insurance. I know the country was also backlogged with actually paying out unemployment. So states were not prepared, right? They were not prepared for this emergency, the amount of people that needed the help. The infrastructure needed to be put in place, at least in New York. The state tried different agencies, right? The first was DHCR, now it's OTDA, right? So it's really finding out the best agency and really trying out the best way to not have there is a backlog to push this money forward. I know that as of 2 weeks ago, the governor actually hired, right, outside contractors to help the agency, OTDA, that's giving out the money. So even the agency was not able to keep up. It's really outside contractors that are coming, not really only, but outside contractors were brought in to help. I also know that the system is overwhelmed. At least in New York, the system, the online system was overwhelmed by the amount of applications, really the manpower, right? People uploading documents that are needed, right? Folks not having technology, right? That we all take for, many people take for granted. Steady Wi-Fi, right? A scanner, a phone. Folks don't have that, especially many folks don't have that, especially the people that actually really need the help, right? The language barriers. It's not everyone that has those resources.
Again, I grant that many don't have resources. The language barrier is a whole other show. You shouldn't be functioning in this country if you've had any contact with the American school system without becoming at least minimally proficient in English. But that, as I said, is an entirely different show. So what we apparently are seeing in New York, by virtue of them being the system being overwhelmed with applications, we are seeing some of their share of this money going to pay for the outside contractors, which is to say, let's assume for the sake of this discussion that New York had $1 million. I just made that number up. So we're seeing, say, 50,000 peeled off just to pay the contractors. So the people of New York would not be getting their $1 million; they'd be getting 950,000. So some of the money is disappearing just to hire the extra help. Obviously, these outside contractors are not doing this for free.
Correct. I mean, I'm not sure who's paying for it, but at some point the states have to dole out the money. I'm assuming that yes, you are correct that this, but the other side is that the money would not be doled out in time, and we would be in a worse scenario, right? The other side of that is that folks are in the shelter system, which is not, it's certainly not, it's expensive, right? And potentially more expensive than contractors, right? So it's really what's the best way to do this? And they've done the calculus.
1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge is the founder and owner of a New York City-based law firm, outerbridgelaw.com. That's just as it sounds, OUTERBRIDGELAW.com. We're looking at where we stand as regards this eviction moratorium. It has been extended now under what even the administration admits are questionable circumstances. All the while, help is out there, at least theoretically. The money has been distributed at least halfway to the states, and that's where the current hang-up seems to be. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626, and we'll be back on the Jimbo Hannon Show in just a moment.
The courts made it clear that the existing moratorium was not constitutional. It wouldn't stand. And they made that clear back in, I guess, July 15th or July 18th. In the meantime, what I've been pushing for and calling for is we have billions of dollars that we've given to states to provide for rent and utilities for those people who can't afford to stay in their homes because they can't, in an apartment, they can't pay their rent. And so we're urging them to distribute those funds to the landlords.
And the CDC again says that evicting people would be detrimental to public health, which is certainly a valid argument, and would interfere with efforts to slow the pandemic, that moratorium to remain in effect until October the 3rd. And again, I understand the compelling need of the moment. It strikes me as very unfortunate that we must proceed here on what appears to be a constitutionally questionable basis just to reach what definitely needs to be done. And again, I would urge Republicans to stop and think this through, that while I am as much of a stickler for the Constitution as anybody, and certainly on a lot of areas of such activity, I would stand forthrightly and say this shouldn't be allowed to happen, because quite frankly, often the Constitution is violated, abridged, and abused for no particular good reasons. In this particular case, something needs to be done. Dumping people in the street is not something that is easily escaped from, particularly if you lack considerable resources, financial and educational. And sometimes you may be dumped into a circumstance that it is almost impossible to get out of. So anyway, as that is a prologue, we're speaking again with a New York attorney, Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge, and with Mark, who is driving through Florida. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, sir. So I want to understand this. I can rent a house, and then I can stop paying on it, and then the landlord can't pay the bill for all the things that he has to pay for, and then they foreclose on it, and then the government comes back in and seizes the property, effectively taking money out of the people.
Was that to the end of the I guess it was. What Mark, I guess, was pointing out is certainly true, that there is, at least in outline form here, a severe opening for abuse of the system. And as I said earlier, and I will not take back the term, the opportunity for deadbeats is considerable. And again, how you precisely define a deadbeat, well, I suppose through some method of measurement, whether or not the person in question actually has the wherewithal to pay their rent. I would agree that we are talking about a situation that is, at least it would appear, to be wide open. Now, Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge, our guest and attorney, part of the problem apparently is wading through the paperwork. And I understand that, and that's the reason why states like New York may have to hire outside contractors. I'm not a fan of red tape either. In this particular case, I would hope that paperwork involves some method of determining the validity of the application for assistance, that is to say, to weed out deadbeats. And I'd like your thoughts.
Correct. So this is very well crafted to define what a covered person is, right? So there are it's not automatic. The tenant has to provide an affidavit, and the CDC order and the website actually provides the form that has to be given, right? And it's provided to the landlord under penalty of perjury, right? It's defined as a covered person, a person who has sought all types of governmental assistance, right, has used their best effort to, there are about 6 criteria, right? So it's not automatic, and it's really curtailed, meant to prevent the folks you're talking about from taking advantage. You have to have used all your best efforts to obtain all available governmental assistance, right, for your rental housing. You have to not have earned more than $99,000 or $198,000 if you're filing jointly in 2020. Or you were not required to report your income to the IRS, right? Or that you received a stimulus check, which means you earned a certain below a certain income. The third criterion is that you are unable to make your housing payments, right? Due to extraordinary out-of-pocket expenses or some type of hardship. The fourth criterion is that you've made partial payments. You've used your best efforts to make partial payments. Number 5 is that the eviction would render you homeless, right? Or force you to reside in close quarters with others. And number 6, finally, is that you reside in a county that has substantial or high rates of community transmission of COVID. So it's not everyone, and it's not automatic, because it's meant to prevent exactly what we are worried about.
So to directly address what Mark driving through Florida brought up, there are considerable criteria being applied there to make it pretty hard to do it as you had outlined. In other words, they're doing their best to try and weed out those who could, in fact, make a go on their own. All right, a call from Wes in southwest Kansas for our guest, Altagracia Pier Outerbridge. Good evening, Wes.
Hi there. Hey, another thing to consider is if you want to get through some of the red tape and streamline things, the people who own the property are the ones that the money ought to be going to, not the ones that are supposed to be paying rent that either aren't or can or whatever the situation may be. There's a lot fewer property owners than there are renters. The other thing too is you've got to kind of maybe stop and think about the Fourth Amendment, because by definition this is seizure of someone's property without due process, whether it be through the tenant or these mandates of non-eviction. By definition, that is seizure of property. So there's some things going on here that just quite aren't on the up and up.
Well, certainly, yeah. I think you make a good outline. Let's cover both of those, Ms. Beer Outerbridge. First, starting out with payment to the landlord. That sounds like an eminently reasonable notion. If the landlord is the person to whom this money would be going, and I assume that this is assistance for rent, that is to say, as opposed to food or a host of other things, and at least some of the money theoretically should be going to the landlord to at least cover the rent in question. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Absolutely. And at least in New York, the landlords can actually apply. Either way, the money will go to the landlord. It does not go to the tenant, at least in New York, right? So whether the tenant applies, here the landlord can also apply on behalf of the tenant. And either way, it requires the cooperation of the landlord, right, to actually verify the amount. The landlord either needs to provide an attestation of what monies are owed, or when breakdown. So the landlord is very much aware that this money has been sought.
And
right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I was just going to, we're coming up on a break here. We'll come back and look at the Fourth Amendment portion, but as I read it, Wes in southwest Kansas is right on target. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, and back with more on the eviction ban in a moment.
This is also going to be a temporary solution regardless, and longer-term solution will require legislative action. But his message to anyone who's been a passionate advocate is that he shares their concern. He shares their commitment. He wants renters to be able to stay in their home, and that's why we took this step over the last few days.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. And again, we're talking with attorney Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge, who has a New York City law firm, outerbridgelaw.com. And I cannot overemphasize this. It is one thing to sit back and, as I can do, in the comfort of a studio that is well heated and or air conditioned, having access to plenty of food and the other resources of the day necessary to get through most of life's challenges, and to, in a detached way, note the constitutional problems, which are real, by the way. But it is something else, again, to be facing the very distinct prospect that through no fault of your own, you might wind up with you and your kids living on the streets, fighting off parasites, both human and animal, and watching the very safety of your family, maybe even your family's survival, placed in question. There is a difference between the detached and the very deeply involved. Ms. Pierre Outerbridge.
Correct. So there are very much constitutional problems with this extension. The White House has stated that they know of these problems, but they are going to forge ahead based on this emergency. A health emergency or other emergencies do provide state, local, and federal governments with the authority to use their emergency powers. So that's where it's coming from. And it's not even promulgated as a rule, which requires a second round of comment. It's really promulgated as an order. So they are very much aware of the challenge that comes ahead. The White House is, right? The administration is, but they wanted to proceed because Congress did not have the time to act, as they say, before the 31st. So that's where we are. And if it's challenged, then the point is that the money would have been distributed, and that would be the end of that. I know that at some point the CDC was wary of future emergency orders being challenged, right? That this would be a precedent for characterizing them as boundless, the agency as boundless, right, and as promulgating unconstitutional orders. But they've done it, and that's where we are.
Yeah, and it certainly should be made abundantly clear that this is not anything in the way of a precedent to go down the road to any number of things which I will frankly dismiss as liberal welfare state wish lists and do, just to simply say, well, it worked with the eviction ban. Let's try it on something else that is neither this timely nor whose outcome is as drastic. I would absolutely firmly stand in the path of that, and I think most reasonable people would as well. Now, as to the second part of Wes's call, he made reference to the Fourth Amendment, and I'll just read the relevant portion here. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated. I'm no attorney, but it does seem to me as though you could call this order, in effect, an unreasonable seizure. Your thoughts?
Correct. I mean, the order. You're correct. I agree with you. The order, however, does make clear, Jim, that it doesn't provide that tenants don't have to pay rent. It says on its face that tenants should continue. That it's not a forgiveness of rent. It's really a delay. That the monies will be paid. Right. And in view of this, the order, which is 19 pages from the CDC, goes into why they're doing it and how bad it is, how the variant is rising and how many people have died, the millions, and really that they really just have to do this, right? I know at least in New York, landlords have mounted several challenges unsuccessfully. One challenge was that it was a First Amendment challenge, right, saying that they were forced to distribute paraphernalia and from the state, right? In New York, tenants have to submit a hardship affidavit, sort of like the CDC declaration, that states that they are that they have suffered a COVID hardship and that they shouldn't be evicted. So in New York, the landlord has to actually provide that to the tenant. So it's clear that it's not in the interest of the landlord to provide it, but that's what they have to do. So they challenge it, saying that their First Amendment right is being violated because they are forced to to participate in a speech that they don't agree with, right?
Right.
It is right. So and that was struck. It didn't work, right, because of the emergency nature of this crisis. So. Right. In the end, it's a health emergency, and that the federal government will do what it will do.
Mm-hmm. Now, as we go to another call here, just to follow up on that, and I may have misunderstood part of what you just said, but let's assume, for the sake of discussion here, that Uncle Sam kicks in $1,000 for my rent that I can't cover. Again, a made-up number. Is there a provision in here? Did I misunderstand you? Is there a provision in here such that if and when I get back on my feet, I have to reimburse the government for the $1,000 they forked over for my rent?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
No, really, it doesn't say that at all. In
Okay.
fact, it provides that landlords, at least in New York, have to waive late fees and have to agree not to sue the tenant for eviction for the next year.
Right.
So it provides for many sacrifices on the landlord end if they receive this money, but there's no paying back.
Okay, got it. All right, here's a call from Joe in Nashville for Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge, New York City attorney. Good evening, Joe.
Good evening, Jim and Miss Outerbridge. And greetings from a fellow Redcatcher, Jim. First of all, I want to say my wife and I, through our church and agencies we trust, try to help people who are homeless. That's a terrible thing, especially for families. But as far as the practical matter of this CDC mandate, in my state, if you need to evict somebody, it's a state court matter. Many years ago, I helped my mother when she owned a rental duplex that she was paying monthly notes on because one of the two tenants, one would get behind a little bit, and she would call and say, I didn't get enough hours at work, and I'm going to make it up, and she did. We worked with her. The other one got into a drug problem and trashed the place and just didn't pay anything. But we had to take him to court.
So, in other words, you're saying that in Tennessee, to your knowledge, Joe, that landlords cannot just arbitrarily, let's say, enter the apartment, grab the belongings, and dump them on the street and say you're out of here and then change the locks. They must do this through a court process. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's absolutely right. You have to have a court order, and they have time, they have due process, and the courts have to follow the state law, and if there's any federal case law that overrules state law, they have to follow that.
Right.
But I don't. What is a state judge going to say about a CDC, an agency mandate? That's
all right. Interesting thoughts from Joe in that regard, Ms. Pierre Outerbridge.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for calling. So, in the end, most states, all states, I will say, ban self-help. So no one can actually come in. No landlord can come in. And you're right, as you stated, that there is a process. The landlord has to prove that they are the landlord, right? That rent is properly owed. At least in New York, they have to. The tenant can raise a defense that the apartment was not worth what it was rented for due to conditions in the apartment. Be it noise, be it that the sink doesn't have hot water. So there are many that they weren't served properly, right? So many steps along the way in order to get to an eviction. And even in New York, even after getting an eviction, an order permitting the eviction, the tenant can come back and say that I should be given more time. So it is a process.
All right, very good. All right, thanks for your call, Joe, and more calls to come. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, as we continue our discussion about this eviction ban with its shaky underpinnings, but certainly it's well-intentioned. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, and we'll be back in just a moment.
like the money is there. And it's either still in Washington, or it's down at state and local government, or somewhere in between. It doesn't seem to me require any additional legislative action. We need to get the money out there that's already been made available so it can solve the problem.
And that is the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. And he makes a good point, except for the fact that, again, we're not talking about a purely objective discussion here. It is very subjective if you and your kids and your spouse are facing the prospect of living in the street. Again, I guess I would have to add to what Senator McConnell said, under the best of all possible worlds. Yes, it would not require any additional legislative action. And Attorney Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge, I'm not. First of all, it's obvious that the process needs to be examined. Once we get this out of the way, at some point down the road, the process needs to be examined. The process needs to be able to respond to real people needs in real time, and clearly the process is not working. Now, if this means to take names and kick butts or whatever, I don't know. If it means additional funding to hire additional staff, whatever it takes, this should not repeat itself. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I know that there are probably going to be investigations right at the end of this, right? Congressional investigations as to what happened, right? At least in New York, I believe that either upcoming or recently, an investigation would be started regarding the process and why it's not moving fast enough. So I'm sure this is not the end of it in terms of what happened to this money.
Well, one would certainly hope that that is indeed the case. More calls now. Here's Niall in Apex, North Carolina for our guest. Good evening, Niall.
Hey, Jim. Oh, thank you. I noticed when Miss Outerbridge Law there gave that list of requirements for tenants to be eligible for that assistance. There was a pretty lengthy list of pretty stringent requirements to make sure that there was no fraud going on, and as you said, that deadbeats wouldn't be taking advantage of it. But part of the problem with that is that it sounds like if the tenants don't come up with satisfying all those requirements, the landlord isn't going to get the money. And I would say, I got a couple of rental houses, and I would say that a lot of the tenants either can't meet those requirements or won't meet those requirements, but they're still going to stay in the house. They're not going to be able to be evicted. And I think part of that just probably explains why the thing ain't working. Probably those outside contractors that looked at the rules and regulations and the fact that the person that the money's supposed to go to isn't the one that's, going to meet the requirements. The tenant's got to meet the requirements. So I could be wrong, but it sounds to me like it's totally screwed up.
Well, let's examine that, Ms. Pierre Outerbridge. Has Niall found a loophole in the system?
Hi, Niall. Thank you for calling in. So the CDC moratorium is independent from the disbursement of the money, right? The moratorium is saying don't evict me, and the money is a separate process by the state, right? So whether or not somebody is a covered person under the moratorium, right, they can still apply for the money, right? So it's really two different tracks.
All right, fair enough. 1-866-50-JIMBO. 1-866-505-4626. Let's talk to Stan in Overton, Texas. Hello.
Yes, it was my understanding that the Supreme Court has already ruled on this situation and that it takes the action of the Congress to alleviate it. And once again, Joe Biden is ignoring the law.
Well, now, apparently the rationale that is being put forward is that the CDC is saying that evicting people could be detrimental to public health and would interfere with efforts to slow the pandemic. And then to go back to the statement made by the president that he indicates that there are some, although he thinks that the majority of constitutional experts are of the opinion that this would not stand up to constitutional scrutiny. But here we go. The bulk of the constitutional scholarship says it's not likely to pass constitutional muster, but there are several key scholars who think that it may, and it's worth the effort. So essentially, what the president is arguing is that they will pursue a shaky constitutional premise, shaky but arguable, in the furtherance of public health and the like. But it may well be unconstitutional. So I think that you have stated the outlines of the case well, Stan, although perhaps not with all of the immediate impact on individual families that are part and parcel of this. Ms. Pierre Outerbridge?
Correct. I mean, I know they know. The administration knows that challenges will be forthcoming, right? And this is why the 19-page order is so detailed as to the findings, the health findings, the numbers, really preparing itself. And I'm sure there are a group of lawyers, right, preparing themselves for those challenges on both sides.
Could the Congress, very quickly before we go to the break here, very quickly, could the Congress take legislative action to simply say, we hereby authorize this process in the short term in the interests of public health? I mean, is there something that Congress could do which would remove some of the questions that are being raised?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, yes, but they weren't able to come to terms as to the length or the need of it, right, or even get to Ms. Waters' bill on the floor. So it's not even getting to the floor for folks to even vote on. So we know that Congress barely agrees on anything, and that's not something that they're likely to really agree on.
In many cases, it's quite worthwhile to not agree. I don't find this to be one of those cases. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show with our guest, Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge, New York City attorney, and Liz, who calls in from Slingerlands, New York. Hello, Liz.
Hi, good evening, Jim. Thanks for taking my call. And hello to your guest. Jim, if I may, I just have 2 points I would like to make, and then I'll hang up so that I can listen.
Okay.
The first one is, if this is such a crisis, why do they continue to let the illegals across the border without being tested and ship them all over the country?
Well, there is no rationale whatsoever for letting them in that's not directly related to this, but on an entirely separate issue, no, there is no rationale whatsoever. It is stupid, it is dangerous, and we could do a whole hour on that, but we've done several already. What's your second point?
Well, to add to that, they're causing the crisis.
Well, they're causing they're not causing the crisis. They're certainly making the pandemic worse. That's true. Exactly. So you could say that it has a peripheral effect on the pandemic continuing and therefore having such an impact on whether or not people can make a living and pay their rent. So, all right. Thoughts, Ms. Pierre Outerbridge?
Well, I think, this is a global pandemic, right? It's not one country versus the next. So we're all in this together, I would say, in the best way.
Well, we're not all, not to stray too far into that other area, but we're not all in the notion of who should be in this country together. No, some people are allowed to be here legally, others are not. So I wouldn't quite go that far down that road. But again, in terms of the direct issue at hand, it's not directly related. To Steve in Angier, North Carolina, briefly, Steve?
Yes, I'll be real brief. What happens between August now and October that's suddenly going to make it not be a crisis in October?
What happened in October? Are we going to be in another situation like this? 30 seconds here, Ms. Pierre Outerbridge.
Well, the point of the 2 months is to get the money out, the $46.7 billion. So it's the hope is that people will have paid, right, and that there would be no need to evict.
All right, very good. Again, thank you all, and our guest again, Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge, founder and owner of outerbridgelaw.com, a New York City law firm. Please stay on the line, and we will speak briefly off air. Again, the current eviction ban goes through October the 3rd, unless, of course, the courts step in and say, no, your rationale is not sufficient. This is Westwood One.
Do you own or rent your home? Sure you do, and I'll bet it can be hard work. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico Easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
Hi there, good evening, and welcome to the Jim Bohannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Online, find us at jimbohannonshow.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo Talks. And among the things that I thought we could talk about tonight would be bacon. I love bacon. Just had some this past day. I don't live on bacon, gorge myself on bacon, but it's a nice little treat that enhances my day and the quality of my life. Now, the good people of California, some time back, rather mindlessly supported a very feel-good ballot proposition about animal welfare. That was in 2018. Now, this is to take effect in the new year. And the impact of this, the conditions, according to that little piece of referendum, the conditions for pigs and a few other critters as well are just horrendous, just awful, terrible. And so there was a lot of hand-wringing and hugging of trees and, of course, in this case, swine. And so it was passed by California voters. So 96% of all pork products are about to become unavailable in the state of California. That's not just 96% of all pork products raised in California. That's 96% of the pork products raised in Iowa and Nebraska, the whole country. Essentially, California is about to go bacon-free. Now, given the tofu-sucking tendencies of the California population, at least as it is popularly seen. I know a lot of bacon eaters exist in the state of California, but I expect that there will be a considerable amount of black market bacon made available. Seriously, there will be a demand for it. It'll be unavailable virtually. I mean, I assume that some people somewhere will try to meet the California market for bacon. California is a big state, 35 million people or so, and maybe there will be some hog operations out there in the United States who will go out of their way to meet the wonderful living standards that are available for the hogs as outlined in this California law. And presumably, there will be some way that they can prove that, in fact, that their hogs live in hog condo heaven. Otherwise, I'm not sure how this law could be enforced. So presumably, some kind of California hog living standard inspectors will have to be made available to go to hog farms in Iowa and Nebraska and wherever to see to that, in fact, the standards are maintained. My guess is that in order to do that, assuming that somebody actually takes the trouble, they're going to have to charge an arm and a leg for bacon. That would be my guess. And that leaves wide open, of course, the very distinct possibility that a lot of people who maybe can't afford a ton of money per pound of bacon will just start bringing it in and making it available, shall we say, under the table. So seriously, black market bacon I can easily see coming to the good state of California. 4% of all the hog farm operations in the country currently abide by California's living standard for pigs. I don't think 4% are going to be enough to cater to, what is California? Something like 14% of the population of the country? Probably not. Black market bacon, I think, is coming. And again, it is nice to feel really good and warm and fuzzy and make sure that all the pig people, in fact, live nice and healthy and hopefully spiritually fulfilling lives. But sometimes stark reality just gets in the way, and maybe somebody should have pointed out to the good people of California in their animal welfare ballot proposition of 3 years ago that what you're going to wind up doing is depriving yourself of bacon, period. Now, for some in California, I'm sure they would say, well, that's wonderful. We should get rid of all meat anyway, and so this is just a great step in the right direction. Others who've never been down that particular road are going to be saying, I like my bacon. It's a great way to start the day. I don't want to spend a ton of money to find out that my hogs that I eat were living in a penthouse condo before their untimely demise. I just want my pig, and I can see it coming. People are sometimes easily bamboozled, and we are just a little bit up to here, I think. I'm up to here with feel-good propositions where nobody has thought through the actual practicalities. Frankly, to have affordable bacon available, we really can't afford to see to it that every pig has his own bedroom and his own bathroom. And we shouldn't. And we shouldn't have to. So I just thought I would toss that out there. If you wonder what the good people out in La La Land are up to, this is it, the latest thing. Goodbye to California bacon, in essence. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. And another topic that I'll toss into the mix here would be impeachment, the I word. And not even about Donald Trump this time. No, we're talking about New York Governor Andy Cuomo, who is refusing to step down. He did nothing wrong, he says. He's just a touchy-feely kind of guy. And, 11 women would disagree. Correspondent Clayton Neville says that the New York State Assembly is now preparing for the governor's potential impeachment.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo denies ever making any sexual advancements and wrote off forehead kisses and hugging as something he's always done with no ill intent. Former Cuomo aide Charlotte Bennett remembers it differently.
He said he was looking for a girlfriend. He was propositioning me for sex.
Bennett told NBC's Today Show that the governor should be held accountable.
We should impeach the governor because he clearly cannot accept responsibility for any of his behavior.
State leaders, members of Congress, even President Biden calling on Governor Cuomo to resign, but he hasn't. And White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked if the president supported impeachment proceedings in New York.
The president made clear that Governor Cuomo should resign, and I believe we should start with that. There's obviously a process that's going to proceed, and leaders in New York spoke to that yesterday. We'll leave it to them to speak to that, but the president believes Governor Cuomo should do the right thing, resign, and leave space for future leadership in New York.
A count from the Associated Press found that at least 86 of the New York State Assembly's 150 members have said publicly or told the AP that they support starting the impeachment process. It would take a simple majority to allow for an impeachment trial. The question now, though, is timing. How long do state leaders wait for Cuomo to step down before stepping in? The Assembly speakers being urged to call an emergency special session to vote to impeach. If that happens and the Assembly votes to do that, an impeachment trial in the Senate could start within weeks. I'm Clayton Neville.
1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Let's take a call from John in Union City, Tennessee. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Jim, and let me talk about both of these subjects that you just brought up.
Okay.
And let's start with pigs.
All right.
And I don't mean Mario Cuomo. First off, 6 slice for me. You can't beat that. We as humans evolved to be omnivores. We evolved to eat a wide range of foods. That's why we were able to, move out all over the different environments on this planet and survive.
Yeah, and some would say that, in fact, that it was probably the addition of animal protein to our diet that enabled our brains to grow to the point where we had the reasoning skills necessary to be who we are today. But please continue.
Yeah. And so, the whole idea of taking this food ideas to extreme, where's it going to stop? I mean, it's bacon today, and somebody's going to say, "Oh, well, we shouldn't eat the poor plants because
the plant people."
Grow to,
I'm waiting. Yeah. I am waiting for we wind up with an organization, pet peeve, people for the ethical treatment of plants. I'm waiting for that, John. I'm waiting for that.
Well, I'll tell you, if anything would cause the South to secede again, you try telling people down here that they can't have their bacon because you would have a revolution. Yeah. Now on to Mr. Mario.
Well, not Mario. Let's be fair. Mario was the father. This is Andrew.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I made a mistake. Please forgive me.
Okay.
As I mentioned last night, he is the embodiment of liberal hypocrisy as far as I'm concerned. If he had been a Republican or even a conservative Democrat, which you and I both know are very rare today, the liberal media in this country, figuratively, and I say figuratively, not literally, would have been screaming from the rooftops, "Somebody get a rope. Where's the nearest lamppost?"
Well, there's no question about the fact that we're certainly talking about a man of great hypocrisy. I must say I liken what's happening to Andy Cuomo to what happened to Al Capone. Capone did go to federal prison, that's true, for income tax evasion. And while he was gotten, he never served a minute behind bars for all the murders that he committed. And getting Andy Cuomo for sexual harassment, I think when all the people who died because of his insane policies regarding nursing homes, in a way this is getting him without totally rendering justice. I'm with you. Patty in Ventura, California, good evening.
Good evening, Jimbo. So I just want to say, first of all, the California voters, as I am one, definitely didn't vote for whatever the heck that measure was, and I guarantee you that there's going to be a recall on that sooner than you think, because there's a whole lot of us who aren't even Latino who love our chili verde, and it's made with pork.
Yeah. So in other words, I'm sure when this was sold, it was sold as an animal rights measure, and everybody got warm and fuzzy feelings voting for it, and nobody, I'm sure, at the time pointed out the practical impact. Patty, would that be correct?
That would be correct, because they always do sneaky stuff on the ballots. But I think You're correct that, these people that are not eating protein, they definitely are devolving in the brain, I think, don't you think?
Well, it certainly would seem so. I can only judge by what we hear and what we see. So I'm with you, Patty. Quickly, before we go to the break here, are you aware of an effort to unpass, if you will, this particular referendum, to change it, to repeal it?
Not yet, but I guarantee you it's going to happen.
Well, I would hope so. I would really hope so, Patty. More to come. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Jimbo Hannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. A number of things to talk about tonight. The question of whether California will have any more bacon after the first of the year, and, of course, the fate of the New York governor. Will he be impeached first? Will he be prosecuted? Let's not forget, as we go to some calls here, let's not forget that the New York State Attorney General, who has a constitutional obligation to prosecute criminals, has said flat out that this report they put together, including the interviews of those 11 women, says that the governor committed state crimes. Well, then she has a responsibility to bring charges. She said nothing at all about that. I think she's hoping that she doesn't have to, and that the state assembly will simply remove him from office. But that wouldn't absolve him of the violation of the law. He could still be prosecuted in criminal court, even if removed from the office of governor. I'd like to hear more from the Attorney General in New York. Ken in Latham, New York. Hello, Ken. Or put another way. Yes, go ahead, Ken.
I hope I articulate this correctly. First off, I want to say I hope this guy digs in his heels, doesn't resign, makes them impeach. I hope it gets as dirty and as long as it could, because every day just makes the Democrats, being one of their guys, one of their people, it makes them look worse. So I hope we are in for a long fall with this impeachment. I really do. Mm-hmm. But what I want to say, and I hope it comes out right, it wasn't that long ago Biden had all but wrapped up the nominee to run for president, and yet people were talking about, oh, well, don't be surprised if they pull Biden, in the 11th hour and go with Cuomo. A lot of people are talking about doing that and blah, blah, blah. And this guy was on top of the world while people were dying in the nursing home.
Oh, I know.
And,
first of all, the idea that they could just, quote, pull a nominee who's got the delegates to go to the convention. I mean, nobody can just, quote, pull a nominee if they've got the delegates. So that wouldn't have worked out. The idea that Andy Cuomo was ever a likely person for president, I think, is questionable, shall we say. One thing I would have to add, a story I've told before, but it certainly fits into this circumstance. I was at a dinner one time in Washington and had gone up to talk to some people at the head table, maybe 20 feet from where we were seated. My wife was standing there. A man came up on her right side, put his arm around her shoulders and began stroking her left shoulder, and then left. I did not witness this, or I would have certainly intervened. He was the senior senator from Delaware, Joe Biden. Just for the record. All right, to Sharon in Crane, Missouri. Hello, Sharon.
Hello, Jim. First of all, Jim, I have to compliment you. You are the absolute number one radio host, and one of the great reasons is your grace under fire with difficult interviews. Boy.
I apologize for the preceding hour, okay? Sometimes these things happen.
You have no apology, Jim. Like I said, my admiration knows no bounds. Okay, two quick things. Cuomo, he could be charged with depraved indifference in a court of law for what he did to the people in the nursing homes. On to California. I was born there, but boy, it's getting harder and harder to admit that. Pigs. Okay. I am for the humane treatment of animals.
Yeah.
Always. And I think that they should be euthanized humanely. Mm-hmm. I am not going to stop eating meat because of the nutcases in California that want to make us all tofu eaters. But I predict they're going to have, if they keep this up, they are going to have people sitting at the border, and not only will you be asked if you're bringing in any fruit products because of the fruit flies, they're going to want to inspect your car and see if you've got any bacon or pork chops or pork roast or whatever.
Wouldn't that be a bummer to be busted on a pork chop wrap? Yeah, I did 3 to 5 for a pork chop wrap. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, and I agree in terms of treating critters as humanely as possible. Yes, but we should keep in mind, of course, that we are nonetheless interrupting the idyllic circumstances of these pigs living. If they are living, in fact, in a penthouse condo, they're still going to wind up dead and eaten. So points well taken, Sharon. More calls to come. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. I'm not sure if there's a natural segue between the two topics. Anybody who wishes to make any comparisons between the governor of New York and swine, feel free. I didn't say that. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. We'll be back with more on The Bohannon Show in just a moment. Welcome Welcome back to the Jimbo Hannon Show, 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. And we have a call from Sandy in Central New York. Hello, Sandy.
Thank you. And before I get going, I wish Sharon were my neighbor, okay? I have to agree with everything she says every time I hear her. You are the best also. Okay.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Our wonderful Governor Cuomo in New York State, if he gets in trouble, right, and they get rid of him somehow, he's not going to be in trouble. He'll be fine. I think he can co-author a handbook with Joe Biden on creepology. They do really well. Yeah. It's unbelievable. The whole thing's just unbelievable. And you know, with the nursing home, this sexual harassment, sexual assault is bad enough, but the nursing home, they should be paying a lot more attention to that also. I think the whole thing is just terrible.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed to say I live in New York State.
Well, it's not your fault. I mean,
you know what?
Yeah.
I'm a Democrat, and I voted for Trump, all right? But I'm ashamed to say I'm a Democrat at this point. But
well,
you know.
I mean, you don't have to be ashamed. It sounds like your voting behavior would indicate that you probably aren't that much of a Democrat.
Well, this is true. I'm a nothing. It's basically what I am. I don't really adhere to all the party rules and whatever. But it's just I never changed. I was for so many years. I voted Republican many times, especially locally where I live. So.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you very honestly, and Sandy, thank you for your kind words. For a good many years, when I lived in an overwhelmingly Democratic jurisdiction, I was registered as a Democrat, simply because being registered as a Democrat doesn't mean that's how you have to vote. And I got two shots at the winner since the Democratic nominee was going to win just about every local race. At least I could vote for the least objectionable Democrat in the primary. So being registered as a Democrat doesn't mean you have to vote any particular way. Doc in Wilmington, Delaware. Hello, Doc.
Jim, thanks again for a great show, and thanks for your performance in the 11 o'clock hour, and thanks again for taking my calls as always, sir. Jim, a couple of thoughts on bacon and on Governor Cuomo. I eat bacon all the time. I'm going to continue to eat it. I eat pork sausage here in Delaware, and I eat our native Delaware food called scrapple. I think you know what that is, Jim.
I've had scrapple. It's delicious.
It's awesome. We have it here in Delaware. It's we call it basically our state dish, Jim. We're known for it all up and down the East Coast. It's wonderful.
Yes,
now
it is.
Cuomo.
Yeah,
I would not call Cuomo a pig because I will not compare him ever to the noble porker. He is just what Joe Biden is in his private life, a sleazeball. Both of them are. And they are both, Joe Biden, well known in Delaware for overly affectionate towards women to the point of being offensive. And Cuomo has gone on this rampage for far too long. Now then, I hope that the good citizens of New York, I hope he digs in his heels, as your previous caller said, from New York State. And I hope that they find a good Republican candidate to run against him if he runs. Or if he doesn't run, I hope that Curtis Sliwa is our next mayor of New York. And I hope, Jim, and I want your thoughts on this, that we have a real good Republican like George Pataki to become governor of New York State. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, George Pataki. Yes, a fine governor of New York. And I'm not sure who was the last statewide elected Republican in New York State, but that may have been the person. It may have been George Pataki. Again, Democrats have overwhelmingly controlled New York politics over the years. John in Reno, Nevada. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Jimbo. You know, when I look at this Governor Cuomo situation, it's very ugly. Impeachment or not, basically for justice to prevail, we need Governor Cuomo to be prosecuted, and we need his secretary, Mr. Rosa, to be prosecuted. Anything less than that would be really be a slap in the face to the people who like justice. It's sad that this happened. but 2 prosecutions are really necessary in this case.
I'm not sure what the secretary did. Perhaps you could remind me.
She obstructed. And then she retaliated.
Oh, the retaliation. That's right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. And again, if there in fact are criminal charges here, the rest of us can say, well, I sure hope they do something. The Attorney General of New York State is constitutionally required to do something. And I'll be very curious because through that entire announcement, there was no mention made of we will be moving forthwith on prosecution of these crimes that they are convinced, or at least she is convinced, that Governor Cuomo committed. So I'll be curious. Thanks, John. Pat in Sedona, Arizona. Good evening.
You know, one way to connect both of these subjects is there's a lot of pork in government now.
Yes, there is.
I tell you what, governors. Now, this Cuomo guy, is this as bad as the governor of Michigan?
No. His dad was the governor of New York, Mario Cuomo. His dad was considered an early favorite to be the Democratic nominee for president back in 1988, but he failed to file papers in New Hampshire and decided not to run. That was the year that Michael Dukakis won the Democratic nomination. So that's the father. Cuomos have no connection with politics anywhere but in New York.
Yeah, but you know, you see about this. You know, you're hitting on the subject of, I'd say, manslaughter when it comes to these retirement homes and what they did. Many governors and blue states only mostly did what they did, and a lot of people died. And the only way you're going to get these guys, I don't think they're going to put him in jail for anything like manslaughter. Probably they'll just make him get out of office and ruin his political career.
Well, it depends. His political career is shot. His political career is gone. I mean, he has several hurdles to face. One is whether or not he is impeached and convicted, which is, I think, pretty likely. Already more than a majority of the New York Assembly, which is all it takes to impeach, say they're in favor of impeachment. So that'll happen. If that doesn't, let's say that he escapes that, then he'd have to worry about criminal prosecution. Then he'd have to worry about the Democratic primary. He could not win a Democratic primary in New York. And if he did, through some miracle, then he'd have to face the Republican in November of 2022. So it's just a question of how Andrew Cuomo winds up on the political scrap heap of history. But he's going to wind up there. All right, more to come. We'll be back in just a moment. Back to the Jim Bohannon Show, 1-866-50-JIMBO, to Betty in Butte, Montana. Hi. Hello, Betty.
Hey.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes, you're on the radio. Go right ahead.
Okay, today I looked at the news, local news station, and they had a report in there that Steve Daines, he's a senator from Montana, his niece, when she was a little girl, met Biden, and he pinched her nipple.
Oh, gee.
And if I would send that article to you, how can I get it to you for email?
I'm sure I can Google it, but suffice it to say that that's a bit more than stroking somebody's arm. That's remarkable, Betty. Thank you for sharing that. Pat in northern Michigan. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Jimbo. I'll regale you with a story, and I'd like to talk about the California pork issue, too. When my son was, about 20 years ago, he was riding the school bus home along a road that paralleled the river. And this was early in the spring, and it was hard winter. The snow was still kind of deep. Well, there was a woman coming out to her mailbox to collect her goodies, and a school of pigs, or a herd, I suppose you'd call them, come out of the woods and chase this woman back into her house. These are wild pigs along the river.
Oh, yeah, well, they're a real problem in a lot of the country, especially Texas right now, yes.
Yeah, but these are not the small little wild pigs. These are normal domestic pigs that have gotten loose. I have 3 of my own Yorks that got loose about 15 years ago that have added to this herd.
Right. Well,
But,
so it is a problem, I'm sure, in many parts of the country. I'm not sure how tasty these particular critters are, but I know that they are being hunted, and unfortunately not to the extent that they're being wiped out. So I certainly share that. What else you got on your mind tonight, Pat?
Well, as far as the California thing, I mean, it's like I don't understand the libtards on either one of these coasts. They reject the blue pigs that protect them, and now they want to reject the pink pigs that feed them. It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, it makes sense in one context, and that is if your whole purpose in life is to prove how morally superior you are, whether through cancel culture or any kind of comparison that essentially says I'm more moral than you are. That's what a lot of these people live for, nothing more than that. And sometimes they're so desperate to seek what they feel is moral superiority that they will adopt viewpoints that are not even morally acceptable. It is bizarre, I got to tell you. Jack in Sewell, New Jersey now. Good evening.
So, isn't it kind of rich of Joe Biden to do the holier-than-thou finger wagging at Cuomo when he has his own little escapades with his staffer,
Yes.
Tara Reid?
Well, I'll put it this way: he is. It would seem to be the last person to be pointing a finger. Yeah, if I were Joe Biden and I found myself in this situation, I think that I would try to dodge the issue as much as possible. I was rather surprised that he came out so forthrightly in support of Cuomo's removal from office. So yeah, he is not the person who should be engaging in such activities. Jack, I would concur. Jonathan in Akron, Ohio. Good evening.
Hey, first of all, man, you're the greatest, dude. I love listening to you. I stay up all night just to listen to you. You know what I'm saying? I go through all the other ones, and you're the best.
Well, you're very kind.
So
Thank you.
I keep it up. I hope you live longer than me. You're older than I am, but I hope you outlive me, man. You know what I'm saying? So, I was thinking it's kind of an unlikely coincidence that you'd be talking about, Andrew over there in New York and the swine, you know what I'm saying, getting taken off the menu. And furthermore, it's on both sides of the nation. You know what I'm saying? New York and California.
Yeah.
We're kicking pigs out all over the place. You know what I'm saying?
That's certainly true. Yeah. I mean, we are, as a matter of fact, Jonathan. In fact, we can actually, I can give you a little update on that here. Let's see. We have a report from Jim Roop on the recall of California Governor Gavin Newsom.
The recall effort, the sixth against Newsom since he took office, but this one finally made it, was originally about the so-called lockdowns, mandates, and overall response to the pandemic. California, the first state to impose stay-at-home orders. But there's a new issue being pushed by recall supporters.
Where's the water?
Republican State Assemblyman James Gallagher says add to the pandemic response problems what he calls the mismanagement of the state's water, power, and wildlands amid the ongoing drought.
Why are you managing it this way? Why aren't you managing our forests? Why aren't you putting more investment into that? This is the kind of policies that are leading. They are killing people. They are literally killing people.
Gallagher and two other Republican lawmakers speaking at the Oroville Dam, overlooking the historically low Oroville Lake, say communities are suffering and alleging that current water diversion policies are denying rural communities water to grow food, and they're threatened by rolling blackouts and wildfires. But at that news conference, the lawmakers also took some heat.
I'm going to be the last one, the last rancher.
We've been working on
No,
an issue.
you haven't.
It's not good enough for you.
It's
I
not
understand
because
that.
it's not fixed.
I understand that.
All of this is leading to an evening of support versus opposition to the recall effort against Newsom. A new Emerson College Next Star Media Group poll finds that 46% of likely voters were in favor now of recalling Newsom, 48% opposed. The margin of error in the poll, 3 percentage points, making it a statistical tie. The poll also finds that a majority of Hispanic voters, surprisingly enough, 54 to 41%, favor removing Newsom. 6% of likely voters remain undecided. The governor, back in March, said he's taking all of this very seriously and calls it, though, a Trump-supported Republican power grab.
You have people that are part of the lead coalition that started this petition that are avid Proud Boy members. They're part of the 3 Percenters, the right-wing militia group. They are supporters of QAnon conspiracy theorists, white supremacist groups. That's not just that's factual.
He admits, however, not all of the roughly 2 million people who signed the petition are Republicans. A good number of his supporters are on board. The recall election, September 14th. Jim Roop, Los Angeles.
All right, back with more in just a moment. So a couple of recent news stories have come to my attention. One is a list of things we geezers can do on our resumes to avoid age discrimination, or AD if you prefer, as opposed to ED, to which I am also opposed. One recent survey finds 1 in 3 American workers past age 40 feels their age has prevented them from getting a job. For one thing, forget the resume format you used 10 years ago. Go with something ironically called the modern traditional standard format. And be sure your resume is compatible with ATS, the Applicant Tracking System, human resources software. Use no graphics, tables, columns, or text boxes. Do not use colored ink, reversed out shading, or lines across the page. Include no core competency or achievement sections. Do not extend experience back more than 20 years, and, they say, if you're over 60, go ahead and leave off graduation dates. Now, here's the other story which caught my attention. A headline from the Stanford University Business School's website reading, "Workplace Equality for All, Unless They're Old." It cites a study involving nearly 350 interviews of young people and found that the more opposed they were to racism and sexism, the more likely they were to be prejudiced against older workers. There is a federal age discrimination law, but the courts have largely gutted it, and some of the young seem to feel that bias against the old isn't really bias. I realize, of course, that this doesn't apply to every young person, and to those to whom it doesn't apply, your elders thank you. But to those to whom it does apply, I have this advice for the Gen Z vacuum heads out there. Please keep 2 things in mind. 1, the sum total of our knowledge isn't found in a little piece of plastic we keep in our pockets. We can actually do math and spell words all by ourselves. And 2, we aren't the ones who can't go to the bathroom without a password. The Offbeat. I'm Jim Bohannon.
This is the Marketplace Minute. I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer. Stocks closed mixed. The Dow lost about 0.9%. The S&P was off nearly 0.5%, but the Nasdaq was up about 0.1%. CBS stock fell even after it reported better than expected second quarter earnings. The company says total revenues were up about 11% over this time last year, but it also said it'll be giving fewer COVID shots than expected and warned of rising costs for labor and technology. The World Health Organization is asking wealthier nations to hold off on giving booster shots to people who are already vaccinated, at least until the end of September, so there's enough vaccine to meet the WHO's goal of vaccinating 10% of the world's population. And another warning from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on the debt limit. Congress missed a deadline to raise or suspend it over the weekend. Yellen says it's not clear how long Treasury will be able to avoid a default. I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer with the Marketplace Minute.
As we turn to Ted in Jamestown, New York. Hello, Ted.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Not trying to be ooey-gooey here, and this is the first I've heard about the swine.
Mm-hmm.
But have you ever heard of puppy mills where they were raised in deplorable conditions?
That is true in many cases, and I am opposed to puppy mills.
Okay,
I merely note that when you are raising critters for the sole purpose of eating them, which is to say killing them, and you therefore price out of the market 96% of all the producers, that's going a bit far. Quite frankly, we treat puppies differently from pigs.
Well, here's the second example. Chickens for your eggs.
Mm-hmm.
They're raised in cages, cage after cage, untold numbers of cages. They never get out. They're fed strictly for their eggs.
Mm-hmm. And while I certainly hope that we do not treat any animal in a manner that is unnecessarily cruel, again, if we were looking for reforms that made 96% of all chicken producers unable to meet the state guidelines for what it takes to raise chickens, then I would say there's something wrong with that particular law, misguided though it may be. All right, our producer and webmaster is Kathy Johnson. We're at JimBohannonShow.com. Alex Hinton is our engineering chores, and I'm Jim Bohannon. This is Westwood One.